Good morning, CLC. I invite you now, in this moment, to join us in remembering that love is why we're here. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice, deep, cleansing breath in, breathing in all the cool, calming love that surrounds you. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. Go ahead and take another nice, deep breath, breathing in this moment that is today. And as you breathe out, allow your body to just relax in this moment. And allow your mind to be here, now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words: I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and allow myself to relax in the peace and fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in the room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your life.
Dibby dob doop doo, nibby dob, yabba yabba dabba doo. So Ernest Holmes, well, we're in the middle of a series on Ralph Waldo Emerson right now, and we started in July with this series of essays, first and second series of essays that most of us are familiar with if we've had any classwork in Science Mind. And then, as you know, I asked, would you like more of this? And two or three of you said you would. So here we are. And now into August, we're going on a deeper dive into the essays that you may not be familiar with. And I've cherry-picked some statements of his out of those to interpret and offer to you. Ernest Holmes, who's the founder of religious science, was famously asked, what is the one thing we have to heal? And he gave two different answers depending on who was asking and when. What is the one thing we have to heal? The first answer he gave, very cryptic and Zen-like. He said, the thing we have to heal is the belief that there is anything that we have to heal. The second answer I think was more useful, a little less elegant, but more useful, when he said the one thing that we heal is the sense of separation from our source. You heal the sense of separation from your source, which is God or Spirit or higher power. You heal your sense of separation from that. Everything else falls into place. There's nothing wrong with us but the belief in separation from our source. And I went over this last week, and I go over it most weeks, about how there's nothing wrong with us, despite what conventional Western religion may have taught us. That there's something wrong with us because of Adam and Eve and their disobedience, or something that happened in the interval. There's nothing wrong with us by nature. We've just made some incorrect assumptions. The assumption that the power that made us deserted us, left us here on this planet, stalked off to a distant heaven, and we're here left to our own devices. So I bring all of this up because I want to give you a little Emerson that's his reaction to the sense of separation as he perceived it within himself. He was this American philosopher who came to an idea. He was helped by others, but he principally within his own spiritual work, he came to an idea of his oneness with everything. A very Eastern idea, and then later he embraced Eastern religion and thought it was fantastic, thought it was the greatest articulation that he'd ever heard through the Vedas of this idea of oneness. But this idea of the sense of separation that he encountered within himself and within society, and that he wrote about and spoke about, he put it this way. He said, man is a god in ruins. Man is a god in ruins. We have forgotten our celestial estate. And so we are like a ruin of an ancient building. You know, you can see the foundation of it, you can see the superstructure of it, but vines have grown up in the cracks between all the stones, and the thing sits there, and it's just this in shambles, you know, but representative dimly of some former glory, some former majesty. This, he says, is who we are, because we have forgotten our divine estate. He said, we are like Nebuchadnezzar, dethroned, bereft of reason, and eating grass like an ox. Be with that image a moment, would you? Like Nebuchadnezzar. Actually, Nebuchadnezzar, there's no evidence that Nebuchadnezzar was ever bereft of reason. He was eventually dethroned. He was dethroned when he passed away and passed on the Babylonian Empire to his son. But he was not well thought of, biblically not well thought of scripturally. It was he who took the Jews into what we know as the Babylonian captivity, you know. So he was not a good person. He was not a kind person as far as world leaders of the past are seen. And so I'm thinking Nebuchadnezzar, a lot closer to Emerson's time, would be George III, who was bereft of reason. And he said, this is who we are. So we're a God in ruins. We have dominion. And we have misused our dominion. And so bereft of reason, dethroned, and eating grass like an ox. How do ox eat grass? Head downward, eyes downward, just looking for what there is to consume. Overhead, the starry sky. Overhead, the sun. Overhead, life. They see it not. They do what oxen do. We are people. We have self-conscious awareness. Oxen are wonderful animals, I'm sure. I know very little about them, but they're very good at being who they are. I don't know that they have the depth of self-reflective consciousness that humans have, but perhaps being a human, that's a bias on my part, and I mean that in all sincerity. Because every day we're learning more about the natural world around us and how trees communicate and all of this, so who knows? But what I do know is what I know and what you know about ourselves, that we have the ability to hold abstract thought. We have the ability to balance several thoughts at once. We have the ability to speculate and to imagine. We have the ability to focus, and we have the ability to free associate, and we can do all of this at the drop of a hat. That's the great minds that we have. And we do not know this. And we do not know that the mind that we have is the most precious thing that we have. And I don't mean by that the brain. The brain's a wonderful organ, a wonderful instrument as well, but it's universal mind that's working through the brain. As a matter of fact, William James, who's another character that we'll get into at some point here in the not too far distant future, because he keeps popping up in my reading, and when that happens, you hear about it, you know. But William James said that the brain, to him, was an organ of filtration. Kind of like, I don't know, the kidneys or something, the liver, you know. It's an organ of filtration. You have infinite possibilities of understanding, but you can't manage all of this at once. And so it has to kind of dribble down like like a coffee maker maybe, you know, with the cone-type filter. You know, it dribbles down into manageable pieces. You don't need to know everything all at once. You just need to know more of the track that you're on. And so the brain that you have brings universal universal intelligence into manageable form in our daily expression. So it is that we learn more as we go. We learn more, but we never learn it all. We never take in all of it. So how do we heal the sense of separation? Well, everybody has their own theory on this, and books are being printed even now as I speak with more theories coming out. What Emerson suggested you do is go outside and take a walk. We've been talking about that the past few weeks. His ideas about nature. Go out in nature, see nature, experience nature. Watch how nature operates. Watch how nature, as he put it, abhors a vacuum. How does it abhor a vacuum? It fills a vacuum. It fills every vacuum. Water rises to its own level. Nature takes care of itself. I was reading relatively recently, and I guess I had known this at some point because I was supposed to, but I didn't, or I forgot, that something slammed into this earth very early on in the development of the solar system, which caused us to go, there's a technical term for this called cattywampus. It caused us to where the axis of the earth running through the earth is not perpendicular to a motion of a direct circle around the sun. Consequently, we're pitched at an angle, and because of that we have seasons. I don't have to tell you here about seasons right now, but we have seasons. And if we didn't have seasons, half the earth would be in ice and half the earth would be baked so hot nobody could stand it, and this would not be a tenable planet for us. But something happened that at the time, if there were a cosmic creator who's watching all of this from a distance, probably said, oops. Oh no, what is this going to mean? And what it meant for us was beauty and wonder and glory and all the poetry and all the art and all the music that connects to the turning of the wheel of the year. So Emerson said, go out into nature, look around nature, and notice the laws of nature. And he was real big on the laws of nature. In a sense, different from the emphasis on spiritual law that you often hear in New Thought. Meaning no disrespect to that explanation, but the way the law is often taught in New Thought is you can have a new car. You can have a new thing. You can improve your estate by treating for it. You can manifest stuff, and you can have more stuff. And that's not untrue. That's not incorrect. But it's way, way beneath the architecture of true spiritual law, which says that all things are working together in a patterned, intelligent way for the manifestation of life itself. And yes, you can have yours and I can have mine, and we can prosper and we can benefit, but there's a whole lot more going on there. Especially when we look at it as if I assume that I am already exactly where I ought to be, then where I stand flourishes. Where I stand is alive with color and texture and flavor and power, where I am right now. Because otherwise, there is a sense of separation. You can let it creep in. It's been called duality. I was talking with a friend of mine recently who's a retired science mind minister, and he's saying, you know, I hear duality. I hear duality. No duality. I can't have duality. You know, well, it's pretty much unavoidable. Because we are human beings having this spiritual awareness, and we're spiritual beings having this human experience, as I think it was Meister Eckhart said. But the duality creeps in, the sense of separation creeps in when you feel that where you are right now in life is less divine than where you want to be. Because then you're living in two worlds. The world of where you are now, the world of hopes and dreams, and there's this longing and there's this reaching rather than an inhabiting and a claiming. This is why in our prayer work we want to get so convinced of the ubiquity of Spirit, the presence of Spirit right where we are in this moment, in that unshakable awareness that whatever comes next is seen as being an experience that it's having of itself by means of us. So Emerson says, whatever limits us we call fate. I'd like to invite you to sit with that statement for a moment. Whatever limits us we call fate. How often have you heard this sort of thing? How we language it in modern times, we say, well, it wasn't meant to be. I guess it wasn't meant to be. And I always think, by whom? By what wasn't it meant to be? Is there something out there that's determining what you and I should experience? If that's the case, then why are we even here? Let that which is out there determining what we should experience, go ahead and experience it. And cut out the middleman. Right? But it isn't that it wasn't meant to be. It isn't that it's your destiny, it's your fate, it's something that's handed down from... Otherwise, there's this whole predestination thing going on, where everything is already assured. And there are religious groups that teach this sort of thing, and it's convenient, and it's neatly packaged and all. It's like where your soul resides in eternity is already determined. There's nothing you can do about it. I got to admit, there's a certain comfort in that. You know, you're on the bus or you're off the bus, and that's just all there is to it. In this teaching, there's work to do. There's spiritual work to do about regaining our divine estate through the recognition of our oneness with our source. Absolutely. You know. And so, every day something has to happen. Every day there has to be some new awareness. Every day there has to be some new engagement in our spiritual program. Every day another inch, another foot, you know, we gain in kind of clawing our way back to that knowing of our oneness, that perhaps Emerson said we crossed the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. There's a theory about this. It wasn't alone to Emerson. When we come into this life, we forget who we are. Have you heard this before in New Thought? They say, oh, we're remembering who we are. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, there's a mythological school of thought. There's this river that runs between the worlds.
The river between where we are and the world to come is called the river Styx, S-T-Y-X. And the boatman on the Styx, and a lot has been written about that. Less has been written about the river that's on the other side, on the eastern side, if you will, between the world we came from and the world that we're in. It's called the river Lethe, L-E-T-H-E. Lethe in Greek, classical Greek, means forgetfulness. Forgetfulness. Well, there's a boatman on that side, too. We step into the boat. But it said that every one of us, as we step into the boat, our big toe or something goes into the water of forgetfulness. And it's wiped clean. It's wiped clean. Some of us possess little bits of remembering. Heard this. There was a story that went around a few years ago. I don't know that it was ever... It's a good story. I don't know. That these two little kids in the back of a car, their parents are driving, you know, and there's a 3-year-old, 5-year-old back. And the 5-year-old turns to the parents, heard this, and it went viral. The 5-year-old turned to the 3-year-old and said, Jimmy, tell me about where we came from again, because I'm starting to forget. But we come into this life, and it seems like we forget. And so this is what we're remembering. It's where we came from. And the implication here is that we come from a place, that we are the children of a world of complete, utter wholeness, clarity, balance, order, perfection. And voted to come into this life to have an experience here in materiality. And a lot of the occult and esoteric schools go more into this. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense on some level. None of this is accidental. So here we are. But that's the thing that we're working back toward, is that sense of connectedness that we have. And it's tricky, because there are a lot of people here. There are a lot of other beings on this planet. There's a lot of stuff here. Also, we wear bodies, and the bodies age, and the bodies have needs, and you have to feed them and sleep them and care for them, and occasionally they develop a hacking cough or something. You have to treat the body constantly. And also there's money. There are jobs that we have to have. We're expected to do things in order to thrive, And then not only are there people here, but some of those people are relatives. And, we have parents and we have children. And you see the point here, and it gets more and more complicated. And navigating our way through all of this, we're trying to see oneness. That's why you go home to a spiritual practice. Emerson was asked one time, he said, why didn't you start a school? Why didn't you start a religion, a movement, And he said, I've been doing this work for 25, 30 years at that time. And he said, I've never had disciples. I don't want disciples. He said, I don't want to bring people to me. I want to bring people to themselves. Now that's integrity right there. Because this guy was big. He was famous in his time, but he could have been enormous. He could have been if he'd started a worldwide movement and collected donations and handed out membership cards, all of the rest of this, but that's not what he chose to do. He was turning people back to themselves. Discover yourself within yourself. He said, this is the title today, if the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would we believe and adore? And preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shown. But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light, the universe with their envoys of beauty and light, the universe with their admonishing smile. In other words, if they only came out once in 1,000 years, did you see the Perseid meteor shower? It's going on this weekend. They're saying, oh, this is spectacular, but in 5 years, in 2028, the meteor showers are going to be just like life-changing forever. And it's always something like that. This is what we humans do. When's the next time? Did you see the blood moon, the full moon, at the first of this month? This month will have a blue moon in it on the 30th. And that's the last time until the next time. And when's the next time this is happening? So what we do is, if the stars came out once in 1,000 years, everybody drop everything, we go outside. And it would be life-changing, but instead they're out every night. And we see them not. Why? Because we're eating grass like an ox. Okay? Because we're paying the bills, we're doing laundry or whatever. We're not seeing the spectacular in the ordinary. There was a wonderful spiritual writer named Brother Lawrence, wrote a book called The Practice of the Presence of God. He was a monk. He worked in the kitchen of a monk. I forget which order, I forget what century, but he worked and he cleaned the dishes for his brothers, the other monks in this monastery. And in the repetition of this and this kind of karma yoga thing he was doing, he had a great spiritual experience. A greater and more profound spiritual experience, if you have to rank them, than it seems like his brothers did, who were busy praying and singing songs and doing all the apparent holy stuff. This guy was working in the sink up to his elbows in suds. And he saw in this practice this giving, this quality of service that he was providing to the others, and that was a redemption, and that was working off any accumulated sin or any accumulated pain that he had experienced at that time. So we look too far away. Emerson said, and so did Holmes, for reality. We look too far. Where are the answers? Well, they're out there on the horizon. They're over the next hill. They're on a mountain someplace. No, it's right here in the ordinary of things. Speaking of stars, he said, if I could put my hand on the North Star, would it be as beautiful? The sea is lovely, but when we bathe in it, the beauty forsakes all. The near water for the imagination and senses cannot be gratified at the same time. If I could reach the North Star, it would be this ordinary thing. It would be just what I do, but instead it's at a distance. A man's reach. One's reach must exceed their grasp, you know. Bathe in the beauty of the ocean, I take it for granted, but it is this normal thing. It is this natural thing all around us, this beauty and wonder. In yourself is the law of all nature, and you know not yet how a globule of sap ascends. In yourself slumbers the whole of reason. It is for you to know all. It is for you to dare all. In us is the law of all nature. We don't know how the simplest things work. Why? Because we haven't asked. Because we haven't paid attention. We haven't paid attention to how these systems and functions and actions occur all around us. If we would notice that, we would see divinity at work. We say things come from the unseen into the seen. But there's a function in us, capacity in us, to look into the unseen that we've not tapped into as fully as we might. We have multiple senses all engaged at once, but we tend to have tunnel vision in terms of the achievement of certain aims. So all of this comes together into the idea of right here, where I am, as I stand, nothing added, nothing taken away. It's the fullness and wholeness and beauty of God. This is heaven. This is heaven. When we cross that other river Styx with the eternal boatman into the next world, we don't know what it's going to look like, but it will be heaven as well. We had a memorial service here in the middle of this week for one of our dear members since 1996, I think it was. She joined us, you know. And in there, the idea came up of Summerland. The idea of Summerland. It's one bit of imagery for the afterlife from various schools of thought. We're always looking at the afterlife, not so much at the life. The life, right here, right now. What's happening right now? I am immortal right now. Each of us is immortal right now. You know that? We are infinite right now in this moment. And if we'll pay attention to what's going on here, the lessons that we need to accomplish our heart's desires will make themselves known to us. We're made of the same atoms as the world is. When our minds are illuminated, when our hearts are kind, we throw ourselves joyfully into the sublime order and do with knowledge what the stones do by structure. We do with knowledge what the stones do by structure. Stones are good at being stones, you know, and they have a certain dimension and a certain weight bearing ability, and they set themselves up into we form them into buildings and so on. But we would do with knowledge. The stones stay where they're put. We would do with knowledge what the stones do by structure. In other words, we would find our fit place and congenial duties. We would fall right into that stream of power through which we're conducted along without impediment to a certain goal of our own choosing. Life would be easier. Life would be simpler if we would trust. And I guess it all comes down to that. If you're going to defeat the sense of separation in yourself, you've got to have a sense of trust. Trust in what? Trust in what you're doing. Trust in why you're doing it. Most of all, trust in God. Trust in the architect of all of this, the overarching reality of this. Trust that there is a power. When you can't see the power, when you can't feel the power, there's a power. Even when you doubt the power, there's a power. Even when you reject the power, get mad at the power, shake your fist at the power, there's still a power, and it just loves on you. It just holds you and it loves on you, and it says, you're my beloved child in whom I'm not just well pleased, I'm well represented. I'm well represented. I'm fully represented and fully articulated through you and you and you and him and her and them and everybody, whether they believe or not, regardless of their creeds. Lisa brought up George Carlin at the memorial service. It was an unusual memorial service, but I find most of ours are, you know. Yeah. They tend that way. She brought up George Carlin. George Carlin has a wonderful routine on what religion God prefers. You should see it sometime. It's quite vulgar, but extremely funny. And most of all, on point. Most of all, on point. Which religion does God prefer? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Another sense of separation. Here's what I like to think. Up and down this street, up and down every street in anywhere in the world, especially this part of the world, there are houses of worship, as they call themselves, that meet typically at more or less the same hour as we are. And we're not in competition with any of them. Because they're all talking about the same thing, using different languages, different textbooks, different languaging. Sometimes different languages, but different languaging, different wording, you know. And you can translate when you go to one of these places. People translate when they come here. What's he talking about when he says treatment? Oh, it's prayer. It's prayer and faith believing, and so on, you know. We have our whole lexicon here. But what I like to think is all of this is like streaming upward out of all of these places. Everybody's saying, I want to be a better human. I want to be a better human. Lord, show me how to be a better human. And in Lutheranism or Presbyterianism or Catholicism or what have you, in Hinduism and all of these that are represented by these banners here, the same message is coming across on a certain wavelength of people here. And of course, what happens from time to time is people get up and say, well, I'm no longer hearing it, so I'm storming off somewhere else. And I'm going to go down the street and sit with those people. And then they'll pick it. And eventually you go full circle and you come to a place where you realize it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's like radio waves and stuff, you know, just pass through, whether you have a receiving set or not. It's just passing through the room. It's like Wi-Fi when it works, right? So he didn't start a religion. He was not terribly happy with the ones that were around at the time. He felt if you needed a religion, say, go out and sit under a tree. But he did say this. And I've abbreviated this. I've abbreviated this because this last part I'm going to read to you here. I've abbreviated this because he's got some terms in here that are difficult, like shawms and sackbut. But shawms and sackbut were musical instruments. The shawm was like a trombone, and the sackbut was somewhere between a bagpipe and a pipe organ, you know, that he mentions in this piece that I'm about to refer to. And maybe I'm being, a bit of a Luddite, but I didn't want to read through it and have you stumble over those and go, what? And miss the point of the whole thing. So I did what editors do and took them out. Now I've told you about it, so you can look up this passage. This is from his essay called Worship. There will be a new church, founded on moral science. It will have heaven and earth for its beams and rafters, science for symbol and illustration. It will fast enough gather beauty, music, picture, poetry. It shall send each of us home to our central solitude. The nameless thought, the nameless power, the super-personal heart. We shall repose alone on that. The laws are our consolers. The good laws themselves are alive. They know if we have kept them. They animate us with the leading of great duty and an endless horizon. Honor and fortune exist to them who always recognize the neighborhood of the great, always feel themselves in the presence of high causes. There will come a new religion. That is happening. And this place is part of that. This place is part of that. With heaven and earth for our beams and rafters. This place is part of that dynamic movement of people coming home to themselves. Not following some leader over some cliff, but coming home to themselves, coming home to right now, where you are right now, is the only power. Ernest Holmes also famously said, I'm not talking about some power. He said, I'm talking about the only power there is. one power. We call it love. We call it unity, oneness, connection. Call it what you will. And it has different facets to it, like a gem. So at different times it has different applications. But this is the religion of the future that we're coming into, is where everybody wakes up and realizes they don't just wake up. Waking up isn't enough. They come to. We all come to, see, and we recognize, oh, right now, where I stand, I am the beloved right now, right here. So, next week, Emerson on conduct out of a book of his called The Conduct of Life. We're going to get into some practical matters of how to use this in society, use it in the marketplace, use it. We're going to look at in detail the essay out of his first series called Compensation. That's coming up next week and the following week, the last 2 weeks of the month of August. And then in September, we're going into something entirely different, which I'll share with you later on. Okay? So let's know right now there is one power, one presence, pure spirit, everywhere manifesting, everywhere radiant. And it's beaming down on a day like this in sunlight. This evening the sun descends, appears to descend beneath the horizon. The moon rises, the stars come out. And in perfect balance, perfect order, we have the conscious under the sun and the subconscious under the moon. We have the thinking, choosing self, and we have the receiving and processing and creating self, and they're working together so smoothly, so effortlessly for each. I affirm and know for each person here and each person engaged in this conversation at home, I affirm and know coming to, shaking off the torpor of ages, the fears of humankind, the resistance, and a nagging self of unworthiness that has never been true, but that has draped itself over us as a way of our giving in to our apparent limits and calling them fate. It has been said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives. And we will call it fate. But now that time has passed. We stand on the threshold of a new dawn, a new beginning for each. Bringing to us exactly what we need when we need it. For the snowing and its manifestation and form everywhere we turn. I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite calling it done. And so it is.
So it is. Be a good place there. It's run by a world-class chef, and this is what they do. So, and then we do on our Facebook page have another organization that we've done our due diligence and checked out and made sure the money is actually going where they say it is. So that would be, those are our two suggestions. And then the other thing that we can do is absolutely hold them in the arms of spirit. So I'm going to invite you into the consciously sacred space, because it's all sacred all the time anyway. But I'm inviting you to step into it consciously and know with me that there is one life. There's one power, one presence, one love. And each and every one of us are a representation of that. We are a manifestation of that life, that power. And most importantly, we are a divine channel for that love into this world. It is through us that things happen. So as I know that all of the resources are already in motion for the people of Maui and the people all over the world in the spots that we haven't heard yet, what we know now is that they are held in the arms of spirit, that they know that the love is coming to them as well as the resources, and that they have the power to absolutely rebuild, and more importantly, to manifest beyond the wildest dreams. And so we hold that. We hold on to that love. We feel that love flowing through us and know that it is so. That the weather is cooperative, that all of the little bits and pieces are working just as they should, that this amazing divine pattern is unfolding exactly as it came. And I'm grateful to know that. And I'm grateful that each and every one of you know it with me. And I'm grateful because grateful is good. So I'm grateful for a teaching that teaches me that I have this power within me. I am grateful for this community where we come together to share that teaching and each other. I'm grateful for our ministers. I'm grateful for our practitioners. I'm grateful for our musicians. I'm grateful for the electronics, whether they work or not. And I'm just grateful because grateful is another word for love. And so I relax and release into both love and law, because honestly it's the same thing. And know that it is so, and so it is.
So it is.